Welcome into Redacted on this, what is it, Taco Tuesday?
It's Tuesday. I was just thinking, is it
What day
Wednesday?
is it? It's a wacky time. Welcome into the show. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we try to cover the stories you're not going to see in the mainstream media. And we've got a couple of big stories we're going to talk about on tonight's show. We're going to look at the very latest on Russian sanctions. A new published paper by Yale is out, and it calls for the oblivion. It basically says that Russia is going to collapse under the weight of these economic sanctions. We'll look at the truth about that. We're going to dive into some of the latest data around Russian sanctions and how it relates to Europe. Is it Europe's collapse or is it Russia's collapse? We'll look at that.
Plus, we're going to look at the new Omicron COVID vaccine and the rock solid clinical trials that it is based on.
Yeah.
Just kidding. That's not the case. Actually, we're going to tell you exactly what this vaccine is based on.
We're also going to look at the massive recession numbers that are out today. Some troubling signs on the horizon for labor numbers, specifically how employers are going to handle the post-holiday season. You know, they do all those hiring, they do all the temporary jobs. Are we in for a massive, massive recession? The data we will dive through in today's show.
Yes, all that and more right here on Redacted. Thank you for joining us. The show starts now. You just might have heard us shit talking each other in the break while the music.
No, you weren't. You were shit whispering.
Shit whispering.
He was telling me to stop shaking the table.
Yeah.
And I was like, don't tell me what to do. This is once again your tip off to the fact that we are a married couple who work mostly harmoniously.
Yes.
And not always. And so.
Unless she shakes the table, in which case all the cameras shake as well.
Yes, he told me not to do that. And
I
then
got a question. Is
Yeah.
it a lot more harmonious in the garden?
We actually work at separate ends for this very reason.
Yeah, we're out working in the garden. I go to the other side of the property because I don't want to be.
He doesn't want to be managed.
I don't want to be managed.
He doesn't
I like
want
to
be
operate independently, and that's kind of how I go.
Exactly how it works.
Yeah. But we do come together. We put together a daily newsletter every day. If you go to redacted.inc, that's how you get our free newsletter published first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee. We don't take holidays either, by the way. So you'll get a great newsletter that you can read first thing in the morning. Kind of brings you up to speed on what's been trending, what are the latest big stories that we're watching here on the show.
What are you talking about? We are going to take off Christmas. You won't get a newsletter on Christmas.
Okay, you won't get a newsletter on Christmas.
Telling me that right now? Yes, there are certain holidays you will get a Labor Day newsletter.
We take off for Flag Day. We take off for we don't take off for anything else. No, we don't take off for anything else.
Bacon Day.
Bacon Day. Yeah, International Pancake Day, I guess. We'll but go to redacted.inc. Please sign up. It's totally free, and you'll get a welcome email from us. Make sure that you bring us over into your contacts list. Otherwise, Google will flag you as dangerous. Very, very interesting. The censorship that's going on.
Well, we're not going to talk about things that we think are dangerous for you to know, but we are going to talk about things that we think are dangerous for you not to know. For instance, the new Pfizer COVID vaccine, which has Omicron. I have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, we're also going to look at Mexico today. We're going to talk about Mexico caving to the United States. We're going to look at the latest on this. The new recession numbers, the new economic numbers are out. So we're going to go through some of these data points today. And we're going to start right now by talking about what's going on in Russia. So 4 months ago, if you listened to the mainstream media 4 months ago, you would have heard that sanctions against Russia were important to crush Vladimir Putin, right? That's what they were telling us. They were telling us that in the West, we've got to put draconian sanctions against Russia. We'll have a few carve-outs for certain things that we need, but mostly we'll put in some really tough sanctions because that will protect democracy. Remember Kamala Harris telling us that?
When America stands for her principles,
Right.
was,
And that's
I
what-
believe, the direct quote.
And that's what Trudeau said as well in Canada, of course, that you need to, stand to fight against this tyranny, and you got to stand with democracy. It would reestablish the rules-based order. We heard that from the Biden administration. The mainstream media, the politicians, they told us all how this would work. Well, I put together a little roundup for you in case you forgot. Take a look.
How is Russia's economy performing under Western sanctions? The US, EU, and their allies imposed unprecedented measures as punishment for invading Ukraine.
Everyday Russians are starting to feel the squeeze of international sanctions from a war that some don't support. It's hard to know exactly how many support it and how many don't. But now even the most basic groceries are hard to come by in that country. And that is something that everyone is noticing.
Leaders of the 7 largest industrial nations announced new measures today to try and punish Russia for its invasion of Ukraine.
Still, the International Monetary Fund expects the economy to shrink by 8.5% this year.
Russia is in trouble, on the verge potentially of imploding.
So imploding. So is it true? Are sanctions against Russia actually causing this country to collapse, the country of Russia to collapse? Well, if you believe the Yale School of Management has a brand new report out that I want to go through. Now, they say they are forcing Russia's economy into oblivion. Those are their words. And here's what it says. Here's the Yale School of Management. Looking ahead, there is no path out of economic oblivion for Russia as long as the allied countries remain unified in maintaining and increasing sanctions pressure against Russia. So the economy is going to slip into oblivion.
Oblivion, that's a big word.
Which is not a word you hear often, like oblivion. I feel like it's reserved for like science fiction books and stuff. But
Sure.
Oblivion. What does oblivion actually mean?
It just gives me a throwback to those 80s compilation tapes. But
Right.
I just wonder if we can have an example, a real world example of an economy that is currently or recently been in oblivion.
Pushed into oblivion. How about Afghanistan? Like to me,
okay.
To me,
I would say that counts. Okay.
Actually, I'll throw this out there to the audience. What does oblivion mean? And I'm not saying
Or
like don't give me the
who
Webster's
I
dictionary.
Googled it if you want the
No,
true,
and I don't
it's-
want an existential, right? Like
Okay,
definition.
you don't want existential, and then I don't want a dictionary definition of it. So then, what do they mean? I guess I would say maybe Afghanistan, right?
Yes,
Where you have
I would say that counts.
uncontrollable famine.
Yemen,
Somalia, yeah. But I guess oblivion would mean totally irrelevant also to the world theater, right?
Sure.
If you're in oblivion, you're like in the quantum realm. You're like Ant-Man,
Yeah.
right? In the Marvel universe, you're not relevant right now in this sphere of discussion.
You have no existence that can be
Right.
recognized by other humans with consciousness.
Right. Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Got it.
Unless like a rat chews through a thing and then you pop out and you save the universe. Spoilers if you haven't seen any Ant-Man or Marvel Universe movies. But so they're going to be in oblivion as long as we in the West continue to keep up this pressure, right? They're slipping into oblivion. They will be totally destroyed. This according to Yale School of Management. I'm sure a lot of parents who spend a lot of money to send their kids to Yale are happy about that. But in the same report, they point out that they don't have the Russian data that they need because the Kremlin isn't giving it to them. Hey, this is Yale calling. Do you have a bunch of economic data? We're putting together a report on how your country is slipping into oblivion. Can you send over some of that economic data?
Can you
No.
support this, please? This hypothesis?
Nyeh. Nyeh. Is that how you say? Nyeh.
Yet, I
Niet.
think.
Oh yeah, niet. No, I'm not sending you any data.
Stop with that.
So no, among the data, think of. By the way, tell me if you think these data points are important to do a Yale School of Management assessment that a country is slipping into oblivion. So here are some of the data points that the Yale School of Management just doesn't have access to. Let's just here they are on your screen. I'm going to go through them. All foreign trade data, all export data, all import data, oil and gas monthly output data, capital inflows and outflows data, financial statements of major companies, central bank monetary base data, foreign direct investment data, airline airport passenger volumes, lending and loan origination data.
Okay, so
just a few items.
We didn't need those data points. We instead used sentiment.
Right. So I guess
feelings.
Like if I gave you, like you're like, honey, I'm going to put together a family financial statement for the health of the year. Mm-hmm. Right.
But you gave me no bank statements or access to anything that.
Right. I gave you no inflow, and I gave you no export data, no import data. I gave you no data.
Yeah.
How would that assessment come along?
It would just be based on however I felt about you in any given day.
Right.
Which essentially seems to be what this is based on.
And I don't want to be too derisive here. Go through and read the report yourself. There are a bunch of interesting data points in here, but there's a lot missing, right? So I'm just pointing out there's a ton missing. And I'm going to point out in a moment here why I think some of the most important data points are missing from their study. So all of that data is missing, and yet you're telling us that Russia is about to collapse into oblivion. But you also admit you don't have key data because Putin won't give it to you, right? Mm-hmm. As you say, Putin is hiding something also by firing certain people responsible for providing that data. Okay, so again, all good points, Yale. Maybe they don't want you to have access to this data. That would be, basically, it's like an analogy that I'm thinking of. It's almost like a vaccine manufacturer that would skip human trials and simply release the vaccine to the public without any proper testing.
Who would do that, Clayton? That's fiction.
Who would do such a thing in 2022? Probably not a good idea to draw conclusions without all of the data points. We just tested it on some mice, didn't actually do human trials. Here, you want to try? So I'm just saying, this is my sort of comparison here. So bear in mind that they just admitted they don't know Russia's oil and gas monthly output data on that slide I just showed you, right? Those are some key points that they do not have, oil and gas monthly output data. They also go on to focus on the commodities that Russia produces. We're talking minerals like copper and, yes, oil and gas. So here's slide 2 of this Yale study I want to show you. Russian commodity exports, far more important to Russia than the rest of the world. What Yale is saying with this screen, keep this up here for a second, is that 60% of Russia's economy is driven by these materials and oil and gas, these minerals and oil and gas. 60% of everything that Russia relies on for its health and prosperity is thanks to this chart. And this chart also shows that the world only gets 10% of these things from Russia. Does that make sense? Are you with me? You follow me here? You following me? I find the best way to learn something is for you to tell it back to me. That's one of the.
Are you going to quiz me on this?
No, that's a learning exercise. I tell my son that rule.
All 9,000 people here.
Yes.
Repeat it in the chat if you got it.
Everyone in the chat room
quiz.
right now, everyone who's watching on Rumble and YouTube and Twitch and everywhere else, tell it back to me. Make sure.
Pop quiz, asshole.
What's that from?
Speed, that's
right. I was just brain fart there. So anyway, again, I'll regurgitate it again. So the idea is that Russia's entire economy, 60% of it is based on these minerals, oil and gas exports, right? That's how it survives, okay? And that 10% of the world only gets 10% of their need of this from Russia. And basically Yale's thesis here is that the world doesn't need Russia.
Okay.
That the world is going to be fine without Russia. That's
what we've been told. Yes.
Wait a minute.
That's their abstract here.
But that's not true because look at our gas prices. It's all because of Russia that we're
Don't
paying
ask
what we're paying for
questions
gas.
like that.
Don't
be logical.
I'm sorry.
Don't ever go up against Yale, okay? Haven't you learned anything?
Yeah, okay.
These Ivy League people.
I mean, I didn't go to college, so.
That's right. So you don't know what you're talking about then when you're comparing to a Yale boy.
Stop with your having respect for logic.
Well, the methodology on this study just kind of cracks me up because I could just see it going on. It's like, we want to do this study on Russia's economy. What do we have? Well, not much. But Dale's been there. Go ask Dale. He'll probably, he's just like, yeah, I'm sure it's I'm sure they got oil or.
Dale. That's a good name. But I always, when I say a name, I always say Sally or a name.
Janice.
Janice. I always use Janice as an example. I got to rotate Dale into
Dale
my
is a
names.
good one.
It's a good name.
What? And Dale from Yale. That even makes
Dale.
it better.
Exactly. I didn't even think about that. So let's put this another way then, right? The world would be just fine without Russia's oil, gas, and rare earth minerals, according to Yale, because they're only getting a small amount from Russia to begin with. Something, though, seems entirely fishy with that assessment, right? Because you see where I'm going with this. Perhaps they're right that Russian citizens will be crushed by all of these sanctions, that under the weight of these Western sanctions, they'll be destroyed, and that Russia will be sent into oblivion, as they say. Then I hope the West feels good about destroying the livelihoods of regular people, right? Because at the heart of it, that's exactly what we would be doing. Right? It's not gonna stop Putin. Literally, the update this afternoon is that Russia has literally made huge inroads into Ukraine, and the collapse of the eastern part of Ukraine is weeks away. So this is not stopping them, really. All it's doing, if anything, would be hurting average Russians.
No, we already have culturally accepted that. No Russian athletes, no Russian dressing, no Russian twists.
Well, they even tried to get rid of Russians getting visas in Europe, right?
Yes.
And there was at least a smart-headed member of the EU that was like, no, we're not going that far.
Yeah.
Like, why are we going to hurt average citizens?
Right.
Oh, now you're aware of that you're hurting average people that have nothing to do with, military involvement. Okay.
Right.
So it's not going to stop Russia from protecting its borders against NATO aggression, right? That's not going to happen, or NATO provocation in Ukraine. They've had 8 years of genocide in the Donbass, and Putin said enough is enough, and there you go, right? That's not going to stop that suddenly. He's just going to go back home because McDonald's closed up shop. This is about hurting ordinary people. That's what it's been all along. Tulsi Gabbard sums it up perfectly. Listen.
Now, despite their lectures and their crocodile tears, it's never been about morality. It's not about the people of Ukraine or protecting democracy. This is about regime change in Russia and exploiting this war to strengthen NATO and feed the military-industrial complex. Now, to Joe Biden, it's even about bringing about, quote, a new world order. We've got to lead it, he says. And he's trying to do just that, even if it means bringing us to the brink of nuclear catastrophe.
Yeah. But if Yale is right, so let's just give Yale the benefit of the doubt here. They took all my money after my education at Yale.
You didn't go to Yale.
It was my safety school. But if Yale is right, then why are so many reports surfacing of new oil and gas contracts with Russia? Here's a new Bloomberg report out today showing China just ramped up its purchases of Russian crude oil. That's amazing, right? Here's what I want to say about this, right? So they're boosting Russian energy imports. Watch what they do, not what they say. So what they've been saying all along is that we want to sanction Russia and that Europe doesn't need Russian oil, doesn't need gas, doesn't need minerals, doesn't need any of that. But what they're actually doing is the exact opposite of that. If they didn't need them, then why did Germany just bypass sanctions in order to get oil flowing again to their country? Watch.
Say this does little for Germany's immediate dependence on Russia. Worse, Europe is contending with surging natural gas prices. Gazprom, Russia's state-owned energy producer, says the Nord Stream pipeline will be shut down for 3 days at the end of August for maintenance. This follows the federal government's decision to return a turbine for that pipeline to Europe, bypassing Russian sanctions. Earlier this month, Germany's foreign affairs minister called out President Vladimir Putin for withholding Russian energy as a political maneuver.
He tried to play games with us, and now the whole world can see crystal clear that he is just using energy as a game play.
Nord Stream is running at 20% of its capacity, and Gazprom's maintenance announcement has raised more questions. Ukraine's ambassador to Canada is calling on Ottawa to reconsider its stance on bypassing the sanctions.
Interesting, right? So assuming that Yale is right and the world doesn't need Russia, then something is not adding up here.
Then why the panic, right?
Right.
And just last month when Russia declared a force majeure and decided it did not have to make good on many of the contracts to send gas into Europe, why did European lawyers get involved and say, oh no, you're sending this gas? If they don't need it, why the hullabaloo? Why bother?
So if sanctions do work, then why is Europe about to have one of the coldest winters in modern times. And why are businesses collapsing? Just a question I'm going to throw out there to you. According to a German newspaper this morning, German corporations have collectively written off 10 billion euros, just over $10 billion, as a result of their withdrawal from the Russian market amid Western sanctions. One Germany company had their biggest loss ever thanks to sanctions. And according to the Financial Times today, natural gas prices. Natural gas prices across Europe have quadrupled this year with no end in sight. It's gotten so bad that Europeans are stockpiling wood right now. Note to self, we need to order some more wood. Yeah. What they're trying to do is get as much wood as they can right now and get as much firewood as they can. They're stockpiling and they're buying up as many wood burning stoves as they can find just to keep warm. But sadly, there's a wood shortage. Wood demand has gotten so bad right now that German newspapers are reporting tons of wood theft. People just stealing wood as much as they can. Not only is the price for wood skyrocketed, prices have also risen sharply. Ready-to-cook beech logs. Have you ever had a ready-to-cook beech log? With a length of 33 centimeters, have jumped up 31% in price. 31% for a beech log.
Do you cook on it?
No, you burn it.
Oh.
You burn a beech log. Spruce logs of the same length are up 22% in price. So let's go to the Netherlands. Like Germany's one thing. Let's go to the Netherlands now. In the Netherlands, business owners note that their clients are buying wood earlier than ever. They're running out. So what are people going to do when they can't get any fuel and when temperatures collapse in the Netherlands? What are they going to do? They don't have gas. They don't have wood because they've run out. What are they going to do? Then over to Belgium. Belgium, the same situation. Wood producers there are struggling. This is the Brussels Times this morning. They are struggling with demand while prices are going up as they are across the entire region. Do you see a pattern here? It's not just about the wood. It's also the stoves. So in Denmark, they have such a big labor shortage that they can't make the stoves to get out to people in time. And the demand for wood stoves is at an all-time high. In fact, one of the owners of the manufacturer says, our stoves are worth their weight in gold right now. Anders Kajgaard says. In the past, he says, we were able to ship from our warehouse. Now the latest orders are already scheduled until March of next year.
That's going to do you no good this winter. March is the thaw.
Just in time for spring, you can get your wood stove to keep you warm. These sanctions are even affecting countries that voted against the sanctions. That's how much the trickle-down effect here is, or the spillover effect. Hungary is allowing logging in some of their protected forests for the first time, just to have extra firewood to heat homes. Hungary even signed a new gas lease with Russia this summer, but that's not even enough. So they're having to go into their protected forests and to cut trees down. Here's the World Wildlife Federation in Hungary making a statement about this tragedy of having to cut down these forests. Even the World Wildlife Federation of Hungary can't believe it. They issued a statement on the country forest being cut down. Quote, there has been no precedent for such a decision in our country for decades. But of course, it didn't have to be like this, they said. Things were already hard enough with trying to bounce back from COVID supply chain disruptions. So they are saying that they haven't seen any kind of move like this in Hungary for decades, thanks to the Russian sanctions.
But this speaks to how it will hit the poorer populations the hardest, right? Mm-hmm. Because people with expendable income will just sort of tap into it and pay more for gas that is at a premium, right? They can start to now use expendable income to start buying wood. But what about the people who can't? And as we are going to have on the show here tomorrow, Bjorn Lundberg, the environmental researcher, who talks very much about how the media would like us all to believe that heat waves are killing more people than ever, when in fact, cold waves kill more people than ever. Yeah. And so, we've all been worried about people, suffering from heat exhaustion, which of course is a real thing, and it's tragic, and the world will continue to heat up. We are not on a trajectory to stop that. I don't think we will be in the near future. But cold is something that we can see coming We can do things to prevent it. We can help poorer people, but we're not at this point. We're only going to harm the poorest populations.
Right. And of course, then the billionaires, the unelected billionaires, tell us how to live our lives. In fact, this afternoon, the World Economic Forum just released a new video telling us that we need to take fewer showers. So take fewer showers while the people that live in their billionaire mansions can all tell us how to live our lives. So take fewer showers because that's what they want you to do. Meanwhile, over the past... What's good?
Sorry, if I could just because it fits in with what you're saying, but have you been following at all all of the celebrity backlash over California's water restrictions? And they're finding the Kardashians were 200,000 gallons over their allotment, and there was other celebrities that are going 400,000 gallons over because they have a 20-year drought,
right?
And so people are starting to get pissed about it because they're making everybody in California ration their water. And then you've got these celebrities that are somehow going 200, 300,000 gallons.
What do they have, fountains?
Right, because if you have these the fountains and certain pools have high levels of evaporation, so they have to continue to feed them, and plus, certain water features. And yes, absolutely, this is something that, the wealthy are just willing to pay a premium for. And as I said in my interview with the author, his name escapes me, is that Americans don't pay for water. You may think you pay for water per gallon. You don't. You pay for the amount of the delivery of water per gallon. But the actual water itself, you don't pay for. That's just not the way it works in the United States. Even though you see on your bill a price per gallon, that's really only the delivery mechanism that you're paying for. And so, yes, absolutely, this is another thing where rations hurt poor people, not necessarily wealthy people. And
of course, today we learned that the EU is in the worst drought it's had in 500 years. 500 years. So it'd be interesting to see how many celebrities in Europe are living that way, the same way they were living in the United States, and then telling other people how to live their lives. Over the past few years, though, the European Union has actually saw wood-burning stoves. There's documentation on wood burning and wood-burning stoves as sustainable. And burning biomass said, this is another great fuel source for Europe. We should be embracing more of this sustainable wood burning, right? At the end of the day, you're chopping down forests and then you're rebuilding, you're replanting them, right? So that is sustainable, right?
Yes.
Except the only problem is that the EU banned wood from Russia. And getting wood pellets, which Europe is one of the largest buyers of wood pellets anywhere in the world, compressed pine, and all of that to fill wood-burning stoves. So where are they getting it? Now they're getting it from the United States. That's not sustainable. Think about it. You're chopping down American forests, compressing it into pine pellets, putting it on massive ships.
Well, you need machinery to do that runs on gas.
Right.
To compress wood.
Right.
Okay.
And then putting it on massive ships to ship it across the ocean.
Which also requires gas, probably Russian gas.
Probably, exactly.
Right.
You see where I'm going with this? It's not sustainable at all. And the price, no wonder the price has skyrocketed. That's the opposite of sustainable. Then on top of that, Europeans have committed to this Green New Deal, which says that by the year 2030, they are going to reduce CO2 emissions by 55%, and they're going to become climate neutral by the year 2050. With all of that being said, you have freezing temperatures coming. You have gas shortages thanks to Russian sanctions, and not enough wood thanks to Russian sanctions. But Russia's economy is slipping into oblivion. Let us know your thoughts on that in the chat below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. But again, Yale, thank you for your study. Really appreciate it.
Helpful.
Well, we know in America if that was to happen. You wouldn't be able to buy toilet paper. Because whenever there's a panic, there's a panic, we buy toilet paper.
You can't go buy a bidet.
Yeah, you just use the bidet, guys, and you don't have to work so hard.
Bidets are
mine would only squirt cold water.
I wonder how close we are to just bringing back the steam engine.
It does feel that way,
go back
right?
to the steam engine. Yeah.
It feels like we're reverting. We're buying wood stoves again. We're going back to coal. We're going back to wood burning. I don't know.
All because of Russia's 10%. All because of Russia's 10% of.
Right, just because these Russian sanctions and because these globalists want to tell us how to live our lives.
Yeah.
We have more news to get to here on the show. We're going to talk about this new COVID vaccine, which is stunning. You don't want to miss this story. It's crazy. We're also going to talk about the massive recession coming our way. We're going to show you the data really, really troubling data that you're going to want to pay attention to, and some planning that you're going to want to do for your family. We're going to talk about all of that and more.
But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Anthem. Do you own a small business and need help growing it? Then AnthemSoftware.com is your one-stop solution. Anthem Software helps small businesses all over America find, serve, and keep more customers profitably by providing world-class CRM software and results-focused marketing services. Your business will not only grow, but dominate in this highly competitive modern world. That's AnthemSoftware.com. Every business has a song. Let AnthemSoftware.com help you sing yours. Once again, visit AnthemSoftware.com to schedule your free demo of this amazing solution.
I should tell all of you, please, if you'd be so kind, smash that like button. We are nearing, if you just smash the like button, what it does is it helps push us further out into the algorithm. And we know that the algorithms are working against channels like us, unfortunately. News stations that are not sanctioned by billionaire corporations, we cover stories that they don't want you to hear. So please, when you hit that like button, it really helps get the message out to other people. And we should say that we are nearing 1 million subscribers here on the channel. So,
and darn right giddy about it.
Yes, very, very exciting. It's been many years of hard work, and I know it's an arbitrary number, like to hit 1 million subscribers. Like Ivan just became a new subscriber. When you subscribe, your name pops up here on the screen, by the way.
Thank you, Ivan Beresford.
I know it's an arbitrary number, and I don't want to get too caught up in it, but it's a big number.
Sure.
And it's really exciting. So yeah. We're excited. And we're thankful for all of you who watch our show every night at 4 p.m. Eastern time, right here on YouTube and Rumble and Twitch and all of the platforms that you join us with. So.
All right. Well, Pfizer and Moderna would like you to know that the Omicron vaccine is ready. So are you ready?
Finally. All right, let's go.
Finally.
I'm going to get mine right now.
Well, okay. Before you go and do that, before you roll up your sleeve and get your lollipop, we have some things that you might want to know about this vaccine.
Okay.
That it's coming to you very soon, this autumn. In fact, probably even in the summer, if you go by the calendar. Okay. So pharma companies have been working on this vaccine since Omicron sort of took over last year, but they did not get the order from the Food and Drug Administration on the final recipe or what was supposed to be in this vaccine until the last day of June. In fact, June 30th was when the FDA ordered that the boosters this fall be bivalent, meaning it should contain medicine to combat 2 variants at least. So that does make sense, right? Because what are the 2 most prevalent variants right now? If you look at this chart, this is in the United States, but it is pretty much replicated throughout most countries right now. You see that the BA.5 variant is responsible for almost 90% of all COVID cases at this point. BA.4 is about 6%, and then that's 4.6 rather, and then descending order underneath that, right? If you look at when, though, BA.5 became the dominant variant, it wasn't really until July. So this chart shows you
July of this year?
Of this year, wow. Right. So if you look so the first data point here on the far left, I know you can't really see it that much, is May 22. So just about 3 months ago when we first started to see BA.5, and then it kind of hit like a rocket, right? Around July is when it took over as the majority variant inside the United States. So BA.4, though, is interesting. If we could just keep that chart up a little bit longer, has made its mark. So it's still in this upcoming vaccine, but it never was a dominant variant.
What was BA.4 called again?
You see, it's like the mint chip green. Is there BA.4, and then the darker green, like the seafoam green, is BA.5. So the mint chip green was never a dominant variant. So it was at the end of June when the FDA said we want this bivalent vaccine to have BA.4 and BA.5, right? And it was based on the fact that they thought maybe BA.4 would be a bigger hit than it was, and it wasn't. So let's first address the Pfizer vaccine, since this is the vaccine that has BA.4 and BA.5. The Moderna one does not, and that's very weird, but we'll get to that in a second. So Pfizer has sought approval from the FDA for their bivalent vaccine to administer based on emergency use. Okay, put that in your back pocket.
Wait a minute, do we still? Use. Okay, no. Why would I put that in my back pocket?
Because I want to get to that data. I don't have. I told you to hold your horses.
Okay, I'm putting it in my back pocket, but I want to go and get this jab. I want to go.
Hold your horses.
Can I get it rectally?
Maybe. I don't know about that.
Yeah, someone just said in the chat, yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it rectally.
Okay.
No, I'm not going to do that. Go ahead.
So what data does Pfizer have on this new bivalent vaccine? Clinical trials? No, not yet.
They don't have any clinical trials.
That they expect to do that in a few weeks. Now, we're getting this data from a press release, which has a link to some supporting documents, but Pfizer is not releasing even their clinical data, meaning they don't have any human trials done. So this is from the press release dated Monday, August 22nd. It says preclinical data showed a booster dose of Pfizer and BioNTech's Omicron BA4, BA5 adapted bivalent vaccine generated a strong neutralizing antibody response against Omicron, all of these variants, as well as the original wild type strain. A clinical study investigating the safety, tolerability, and immunogenicity of the Omicron BA4, BA5 adapted bivalent vaccine in individuals 12 years of age and older is expected to start this month. Okay, that means you have tested this in no people yet. No people. You expect
you can understand that because, look what happened when they tested it in people the last time. We see the documents. They're not going to make that mistake again.
Absolutely right.
So we're not going to test. Here's a vaccine for people. We're not going to test it on people. Who wants to be the first one to try it?
So they're saying that their preclinical trial data is pretty good. That's what they're saying. What does that mean?
So what they're saying is pretty good. They're basically saying, well, we've had other vaccines we've made in the past.
No. So what they mean by preclinical most of the time means animals. So they've tested on animals only. But given the fact that they did not get instructions on how to make it until, let's say, July 1st, right? We're only in August. And the fact that during the first animal trials of the first COVID vaccine, we now know that they administered it to animals, but they then culled those animals 2 weeks after the vaccine, which is a nice word for saying they killed them.
Yeah, why?
Right?
Just say killed instead of culled. Right?
I don't know. It's an industry term, and I feel like it's not shocking people if I use it. But yes, they killed the animals 2 weeks after getting those vaccines. So they never had a chance to observe any long-term effects in preclinical trials.
So you're saying that they had those animals that they injected and they only had them for 2 weeks. Then they killed them. So they don't know long-term.
They never knew that about animals. We don't know if these preclinical trials were done on animals that were killed 2 weeks later or if those animals are still living. We do know they felt the results of those animals was A-okay, right? We also know that it showed that the animals had an antibody response that they felt was strong against the Omicron variants. That's all we know. Pfizer won't give us the data for preclinical trials, only they admit that they have not done any human testing, right? So did this happen? We don't know if there were obviously it's too soon to know any long-term effects in any preclinical trials because it's been less than 8 weeks that they've even had the recipe instructions.
They don't even know that for the first ones.
True.
Long term.
Right. So you would think
because that was one of the big criticisms, right? A lot of the doctors we've spoken to on this show and others, right? Dr. Peter McCullough, and many others who look at this long term. First of all, I'm not comfortable signing off on this until I've had at least 2 years of data to look at.
Yeah.
Right. So when you only have a few months to look at.
No, in this instance, we're looking at a few days. July 1st is it's August 23rd right now. That's about 7 weeks.
And I think part of the story is going to be going forward is that we no longer need 2 years. This is what we're learning is that they have now found this magnificent loophole to make billions of dollars, shorten the window. Wouldn't we love to see the court documents? I would love to see the internal discussions about how they now realize they have carte blanche to be able to push these things out as quickly as possible using emergency use authorization, not having to go through long-term clinical trials, and be able to make billions of dollars in a short amount of time.
Right. So you would think. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, I was just going to say it set a precedent. When they first were able to do that, they're like, oh, we can bypass all this stuff as long as there's not another drug. And if there does happen to be another drug, all we have to do is marginalize it, make it sound like it's evil, and then we can keep this. And the FDA is willing to get on board and even hide the data for us.
Well, you make a good point about the FDA. So I want to talk about this because you would think the FDA would say, we're not really comfortable approving a vaccine that has no clinical trials, right? But in this case, that's not really true. In fact, the FDA told vaccine manufacturers when it released the instructions for this bivalent vaccine, they said they're going to be A-okay with this, even if there are not full clinical trials. This is from the FDA press release, that instructed them to make the bivalent vaccine that, again, we're telling you came out on June 30th. Vaccine manufacturers have already reported data from clinical trials with modified vaccines containing an Omicron BA.1 component, and we've advised them that they should submit these data to the FDA for our evaluation prior to any potential authorization of a modified vaccine containing the Omicron BA.4 or 5 component. So they're saying we already saw a vaccine with some clinical trials that had Omicron BA.1. So we think we can copy and paste that over and apply that to BA.4, BA.5. They said manufacturers will also be asked to begin clinical trials with modified vaccine containing the BA.4, BA.5, as these data will be of use as the pandemic further evolves. So they're saying we will eventually want them to do clinical trials, but that's not a precursor to approval. They say they want these trials to happen, right? But not first. So if the FDA approves, I'm sorry, let me just, so if the FDA does approve Pfizer's application from yesterday, they've all said, Pfizer and the FDA will say it will be available immediately. Okay. No clinical trials, but available immediately. Go ahead, David, what you're going to say?
Well, I was just going to ask, where's the emergency?
Yes, I do want to show you the data on the emergency. So, but first let's talk about the Moderna Omicron vaccine, because this one, on the other hand, does not have BA.4, BA.5. In fact, this booster is based on BA.1.
Wait a minute. So you just showed us a graph which shows that the dominant strain
is BA.5.
Overwhelmingly is BA.5, and even some of it is BA.4, but not predominantly. So BA.5 is the number one.
Yes.
Right? That's the one that gives you the sniffles now. Right?
Yes. Can we put that graph back on the screen?
Yeah, that one up there, Philip. So that one where's the BA.5 in this?
Is the mint chip ice cream one.
All green. So that's the big one.
The seafoam green is what we called it earlier.
Okay.
Is BA.5, the big one, right?
Okay, so that's the big one.
Yes.
So now this new Moderna vaccine
based on BA.1, which you can't even see because
BA.1 is
because the rose pink is BA.2.
It's gone.
Yeah. Which we basically don't have any, right?
So who's signing up for the Moderna vaccine?
In fact, in the US, the first chart we did showed that the percent of cases this week of BA.1 is 0.00. Yeah, that chart. So,
I mean, people wake up.
Yeah, people are going to be like, that vaccine is so BA.1. Like, I'm not.
It's
right.
So yesterday.
I'm on the BA.5, man.
At least Moderna did do clinical trials.
Oh, but on the BA.1 vaccine that no one needs anymore.
Of the BA.1, but let's look
Which means they just caught up.
Right. But can you put the next screen up? Look at their sample size. 437 participants.
Wow, that's huge.
No.
Oh, it's not big?
That is a small...
That's a smidgen. That's a smidgen of people.
That is a very small sample size for something that you intend to roll out to the greater population. I love the way...
At least it was well tolerated.
Well tolerated. Is like... These are the words that we're using? That could mean anything, right?
I'm well tolerated. I'm well tolerated in my house. Well, maybe not.
Yeah,
so.
it was I feel tolerated like in...
I'm not even well tolerated. I'm just tolerated.
That's like how you deal with a rash.
Your go-to is well tolerated.
Is how people deal with you.
We welcome Philip to. Here's Philip. Would like to introduce you to Philip. He's well tolerated.
Yeah. So, again, Moderna's data relies on the fact that they felt pretty good about previous variant boosters. So they assume that this one is all good too. Now, both Pfizer and Moderna boosters are only to be administered to fully vaccinated patients. That means you can't go and take these as your first vaccine if you weren't already given your first 2 vaccines, which is strange because if for some reason, I can't imagine who this archetype is, but let's say you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to go and get that COVID vaccine now. I held out for 2 years, but now's a good time. Then you need to go and get the first 2 doses of the original COVID variant, right? And then wait a few weeks and then get your Omicron booster. So that would be quite a few vaccines.
That's where the Moderna comes in then, is what you're saying. So you have to go first get your Moderna because that covers B1. And then a few weeks later, go get your...
Your first one cannot be a variant. Your first, if you're starting now, your first one has to be the original, the OG vaccines.
Right. Is
the
that what
Wuhan
the Moderna
lab
one is?
You need the Wuhan
Moderna
lab.
is also a booster. So we're talking about 2 different boosters, Pfizer and Moderna.
Okay.
Right.
And just to point out, if you do have to go back and get that first one, you're now paying out of pocket because the federal government is stopping their program of paying for you.
When do I get the
so
BA?
It's no longer emergency use?
No,
not that one.
It still is. It's just that the federal government is no longer paying. Now, okay, you two, I know you want to talk about emergency use. Let's do it. Why is the FDA using emergency use? Well, let's look at COVID cases in the U.S. right now and ask yourself, does this an emergency make? Okay. COVID cases, now these are hospital admissions in the United States for data up to today, down 76%. 76%. Okay.
Don't say it's not an emergency.
I'm just saying
they want this emergency use authorization.
Okay,
right?
But again, now look at COVID deaths, right? Next chart. So this is pretty much for the whole of the pandemic. We see a big spike around December 2020, right? And then another big spike around the early spring of this year, but nothing like that since. So
is that clear though? Does that say with or from?
Well, again, these are CDC numbers, and we do know that the CDC does count people who died with COVID, not necessarily from COVID. So we will put an asterisk in this data.
So if you had COVID and you were in a car accident, you died with COVID.
Now, according to Yale Medicine, during the authorization of the original COVID vaccine, the FDA issued emergency use authorization based on these standards. It said for an emergency use authorization, that's EUA, for a COVID-19 vaccine, for example, the FDA required that at least half of the clinical trials on human beings be followed for at least 2 months after vaccination. For full FDA approval of a COVID vaccine, participants are followed for at least 6 months. Okay, we never have got full FDA approval. We all got, for the original vaccines, we had emergency use, right? Mm-hmm. And the FDA required 2 months of clinical trials. So why are they not doing that anymore? Could it be from the fact that the original clinical trials were not awesome results, that there were complications, which we're only just hearing about now, right? So how do we know?
Right.
How do we trust this when we know Pfizer had adverse reactions in their original clinical trials when it was required?
And the data
now
they hid
are
from us.
Being allowed to skip it, right? So how?
They tried to hide it for 75 years. I mean, that's telling.
They did, and now they're being allowed to skip it, right? So the FDA, though, has already said, we don't need this. We're going to approve this no matter what. This immunobiologist, Deepta Bhattacharya from the University of Arizona College of Medicine in Tucson was talking about this approval process and said, we're going to use all of these data that we've learned not only through the vaccine, but decades of viral immunology to say, the way to be nimble is we're going to do these animal studies, right? Meaning omitting human studies. We're really not going too far out on a limb here. And I'm like, I read this quote and I'm like, not too far out on a limb. How about no limb? How about no limb at all? It reminded me of this this line from Despicable Me, one of my favorite movies.
The limb right now. No limb.
No limb. No limb at all when it comes to vaccines. But they're saying that's okay. You know, we got some from some animals. We did this before. It went A-okay. We'll just climb out on the limb. So how do you feel about that? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what to consider here. Right?
Was DeepDip part of the Barrington documents?
In this sense, this person was quoted on behalf of the speaking on behalf of the approval process for the FDA. So I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
You know,
okay.
They've learned their lesson. This is how government operates, right? This is how Congress operates. That they learn their lesson by making something public, by giving us the approval process, by going through clinical trials, right? This is what Congress does with the defense budget. They don't want us to know about. Instead of having it up for public debate, they learned their lesson going through the Obamacare nightmare, right? By having months and months and months of dissections and public data about the Obamacare. We're going to start doing these behind closed doors, and where no one has to public debate about it, where no one can even read the bill, and then we approve it in the middle of the night and the president quickly signs it, and then $400 billion gets sent off to war zones. So the same thing with clinical trials. Like, we're not going to go through all of that. Like, why would we go through clinical trials where we test it on people, and then we have all of this data that shows that it's bad and that it really hurt people?
And then people sue us to see it.
Yeah.
And then it looks like we're hiding it because we are.
Why would we want to go through all that? Here's an idea. We'll just skip that whole process where we don't actually do any of the trials, and we'll just push it out.
Well, it's no wonder then when you look at vaccine adoption in the United States, it's very low, especially for boosters, right? So full adoption of children is only at 30%. If we can throw this chart up, full adoption of teenagers, 60%. It's 65 and up is the most vaccinated population and the most boosted. But even that, like, booster rates are fairly low, right? People just don't want this because we're tired of stories like this that do not inspire trust. And so it's interesting that the media will spin it like, oh, it's really too bad that people are just not choosing to take the vaccine, as if the media has an end goal to get you vaccinated. I have no end goal at all other than you make decisions that you think are best for your body based on honest data, which it doesn't seem we're getting.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and it's all, everything is brought to you by Pfizer. I mean, all the news shows and everything. So you have to feel like they have some kind of, pull on what is talked about there. And one thing that's really important too is the FDA the drug companies used to have a process they went through with the FDA to get approval for a drug. It was this huge circle, and every drug had to go through it. But pharmaceutical companies were getting pissed off that they weren't getting the patents quick enough. So they cut that process in half just so they could get patents. So, like, when you hear, like, at the very beginning of this, all of these companies were fighting not to get the virus or the vaccine out to all these countries to help, let's do the right thing. Let's help as many people. No, they fought to get it out to get the patent. And that was the main thing. And so they cut that in half. Now it's been cut in even more to get the emergency use. I say it too, Clayton. Emergency use, not use, authorization. To get it out even faster. So this process has gone from this circle to a half circle to now a quarter of a circle. And before long, it's like this is the first time we're seeing it come out without anything.
Yeah.
Days, weeks even for approval. And they're just rushing it to market. And they'll make billions. Yeah. I mean, at the heart of it, just follow the money, right? Because we have the data from how much they were raking in record profits from the vaccine specifically right now. So of course they don't want to. And we got this admission from one of the CEOs saying, well, now that most people, we've got to find a way to keep our profits up. So what we're seeing is that we really want to encourage people to get those boosters. We've got to, So they're acknowledging that now once we get through all of this, their profits aren't going to be anywhere near the level they were unless they can have this continuous booster every 6 months. Make sure that people are, there's advertisements for it. There's public service announcements for it. The government is pushing it on your behalf, or they're going to buy it. The government will just buy it from them, subsidize it. So they'll still make their money like the weapons manufacturers do. You won't pay for it out of pocket, but you'll be paying for it in your tax dollars. That's how
Well, I'm probably going to see one of those. Remember after 9/11, we used to go to the airport and you'd see threat level orange or yellow.
Yeah.
I'll bet you we're going to see something like that, like COVID levels orange. It's like, oh, we need to go get vaccinated.
Yeah,
Right.
or they, shift to monkeypox, or now the new one today is tomato. What is it called? Tomato pox?
Tomato virus.
Tomato
or
virus.
Tomato flu.
Tomato flu. Looks
And
like chicken
I was really concerned about the intonation of the news articles that I read around this: New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Associated Press. It's all, Omicron variant. Pfizer submits Omicron variant to the FDA. That's the headline, right? And it's not until you get almost 2/3 down most of those stories that it said they had a departure from normal trials by not doing them, right? You just don't get this as that should be the headline, in my opinion. But they're not that concerned about it. So I guess they think you shouldn't be either.
I mean, this is why the mainstream media lies to you, right? So most people, they flip open their Google News feed or whatever, and they get this information and they see these headlines. They don't even really read past the first or second paragraph, excuse me. And that should be the headline. Like Pfizer, ditches clinical trials for their new vaccine, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't that be the headline?
Crazy? It is the headlines on your independent journalists. Like the thing that really pisses me off is when you first get an iPhone or you first, download a certain app, they give you here's our news sources, like Facebook newsfeed. Here's the news sources that we think are credible. And you're going to get the headlines like you guys are seeing. But like if they would allow third party independent journalists in there, we do have the headlines that people need to read.
Yeah, when you sign up for one like Apple News or Google News, they give you like suggested news sources that they've approved, like, well, here, what about CNN? Would you like CNN? Would you like Fox? Would you like anything other mainstream media? Would you like these sources? How about that? How about the Atlantic?
And here's one that's kind of edgy, the Blaze.
Yeah. Right.
They give you slightly
Well, I
edgy
mean,
one.
but that's the thing. That's the thing is like they're eventually you will see the independent news media like those headlines because they're slowly working with the tech companies to get rid of any dissenting voices anyway. So then the only people that you have left are independent journalists that parrot exactly what you're hearing everywhere else.
Right.
So
or else get
that's,
punished the way we have when we, have done shows before about some of the clinical trials that we just did talk about.
We have a story that I want we'll have in the newsletter, hopefully tomorrow, if not tomorrow, the next day, on some remarkable news about the censorship on social media platforms, specifically, we won't name names, and what they literally, some hidden documents that have now been released that are basically showing their marching orders on how they're going to handle certain content on their platform. They did not want you to see. So we'll have that in the newsletter. Make sure you go to redacted.inc to sign up for our free newsletter because you can read it first thing in the morning. We've got more news to get to here. We're going to talk about what's coming up with the recession, the massive amount of recession data that we're seeing. We're going to go through how this looks from the labor side of things and what you need to do to prepare your family for that. We're also going to look at what Mexico just did and cross the line with the Biden administration. But is Mexico caving to the Biden administration? Kind of a big update on a story we've been following for you. So we'll bring you that story. But first, right now, you can get up to 13 free stocks valued at up to $32,500. That's right. Just for opening a free account with my favorite trading platform, my friends over at Moomoo. Now, I'll give you that link in a moment. That's right there on your screen, but I'll tell you more about it. But first, some background on Moomoo. Moomoo is a NASDAQ-listed company, and it's a commission-free trading platform for stocks, ETFs, options. It's available on all of the major platforms, including iOS, Android, Windows, Macintosh, all of them. Moomoo's parent company is NASDAQ-listed fintech giant Futu Holdings, whose subsidiaries are licensed and regulated in the United States, Singapore, Australia, and Hong Kong. So what is Moomoo? How are they different than other trading platforms? Well, they have an integrated trading platform that not only provides convenient trading, but also a full set of powerful free tools. So you get level 2 market data. You have easy research and tracking functions with AI tools. It's also worth mentioning that for those who don't feel comfortable with trading, you can actually trade with fake money. Paper trading is what it's called. If you're just getting started and you don't know what you're doing yet, don't use any of your own money. Get your free stocks from opening the account, but then just learn about how to trade using some of their fantastic university tools and training courses that they have for free inside the app. So now the best part. If you're looking for a professional platform for research and trading, Moomoo would be one of your best choices. With the powerful functions mentioned above, you can easily make smarter investments just with the app in your pocket. And new users will get a huge bonus when you sign up. Open and deposit, you'll get 13 free stocks valued up to $32,000 just by going to redacted.inc/Moomoo. Try it right now. Go to redacted.inc/Moomoo and download it today. Make your initial deposit and get your free stocks. All right, I need a swig of water. Sorry.
All right, take a swig of water.
Thank you for your super chats. We're going to try to get to some super chats tonight. So thank you. I see some coming in here. Thank you so much.
And stop it about the watch. It's just a watch. It's not a political statement.
People are like,
So,
you like rainbows? You must be a woke.
I do like rainbows.
So our 5-year-old, for those of you who are new to the show, I will defend my wife, okay? My 5-year-old little girl draws rainbows like in every, she could be drawing like a picture of a car and then there's a rainbow in the drawing. She always does it.
Yeah.
So she loved this watch band because of that. So I bought it for her for like Mother's Day or
And
whatever.
people think I'm trying to put my political statements in your face. I'm not.
She's like, I just like it
But
because
and
it
I
goes with
also
every
just
outfit.
really like pearls too, and that's also not a political statement. These are
Hey,
black pearls.
I wear white after Labor Day, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Bitcoin,
All right.
Bitcoin Russ says he uses a bidet. So good for, see, we all have our things.
Yeah.
Right? We all have our things.
You can like what you like, right?
Yes.
This is not, and sure, I support LGBT community. I'm sorry, that didn't come out right at all.
You forgot all the extra things they add onto it. Yeah.
But I don't need you to think that this is a statement in your face. It's just a rainbow.
Yeah.
I like rainbows. And my favorite color is green. What about you, David? Is it white?
Nope, mine is blue, actually.
Blue. Yeah, mine's blue as well.
Philip?
I'm a purple kind of guy.
Okay. All right. I have a good friend. Her son says his favorite color is golden. Never heard that before, but I like it. That's an original child.
Midnight blue.
Isn't that an adjective?
I thought so
Golden.
too. Yeah.
All right. Well, something big is coming, guys, and world leaders are trying to hide it from you because it's not good for them. I'm hearing the same spin right now. I'm hearing it in Britain. I'm hearing it in Canada. I'm hearing it in the United States and more. All the data that I'm looking at, that we've been looking at, shows a massive recession is heading our way just after Christmas time. And the reason I say just after Christmas time is because we're talking about the seasonal employment, right? So you'll get that seasonal employment at the department stores, and they're going to hire people temporarily when they're home from college or whatever. So that's always like futzed up numbers. So after that time, 6 months down the road is what we're seeing in this data. And this is not my data. Very smart people who've been studying this and who are being ignored, by the way, by the mainstream media and by the White House are saying this. This is going to lead to massive layoffs, massive job losses, and businesses closing permanently. Now, you thought the pandemic was bad. Just wait until you see like the undertow from the pandemic that was then, of course, exacerbated by what the Federal Reserve did and the central banks around the world. I'm going to go through some of this data. It's very important to pay attention to, and I want you to, tell your friends about it. Tell your, friends on Facebook about it. Tell your, family around the dinner table about it because it's very, very important. So when asked about it at the White House briefing room just the other day, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says nothing to see here. Nothing to see. The labor market is just fine and dandy. Don't ask me that question.
It was this president's plans that contributed to inflation, right?
No, it was not. It was this president's plan. If we talk about the American Rescue Plan, look, Peter, when the president walked into this administration, there was an economic crisis, there was a COVID crisis, there was a climate change crisis, and we're still dealing with a lot of that right now. But the president turned the economy back on. There were businesses that were closed, schools that were closed.
Hold on, I'm just going to pause it there. There was a climate crisis when president. What the hell does that have to do?
I don't know.
What does that have to do with inflation?
Yeah, and it's not a past tense. So I don't know
when he came into office, there was a climate crisis. By the way, climate crisis is gone now thanks to Joe Biden. But that is tied to inflation.
And
somehow.
it was Trump that wanted to put, I'm not, defending anybody, but it was Trump that wanted to let businesses go back to work before anybody else.
Right. But no, we had a climate problem. I just wanted to stick that in there. Yeah.
And because of the American Rescue Plan, by the way, no Republican voted for that plan. And that plan had $350 billion for public safety, another thing that Republicans talk about, but they actually don't do, and they don't push forward on a policy that will help our law enforcement. That plan helped put us in a stronger labor market and help make our economy stronger.
I feel better. I really feel better. I'd love to know what the hell she's talking about. I really would love to know what data she's talking about, what the White House is talking about. I'd love to know because
It was a problematic question, though. Peter Ducey said it was this president who, created inflation, right? Like she was never going to agree to that.
Yeah, I mean, that was the tail end of a question that was talking about inflationary numbers, right? But this was also when they're telling us that gas prices have come down. So this is right around the same period here just a few weeks ago, right? This was their victory lap of the economy is now improving, right? So that's what they're telling us. The economy is improving. That's what the White House is saying.
Yes.
That's what European leaders are saying, right? This is
I'm only paying $4.75 for gas right now. That's hella cheap.
Wow. That's a huge improvement, but
the price of steak is down 2%.
Oh, okay.
Do you feel better?
Feel better.
Your filet mignon, Buffy, is cheaper.
I feel so much better.
Because here's the data that I'm seeing. Joe Biden, you take a look at this headline. 50% of employers say they expect to cut jobs in the next 6 to 12 months. Just read that again. 50% of employers expect to cut jobs in the next 6 to 12 months. So,
Ford Motor Company just announced they're laying off 3,000 people to prepare for the electric vehicle market.
Okay.
Good. There's your green revolution, right? Well, get your electric cars. We're going to lay off thousands of people.
Which again is antithetical. If you read Bjorn Lomborg's research, he points out that when populations become wealthier, they start to make more green choices, right? So one of the best ways, in fact, to further climate agenda is to actually help boost GDP, not collapse an economy, because then you have more dependence on, say, fossil fuel and deforestation and cheaply produced goods and all of those things. So, okay, sorry, I went on a tangent.
No. So here's the new Pew Research Study that just came out, okay? And this is what that headline 50% is based on here. So here's the new Pew Research Study, and we're going to scroll down here, and you can see a lot of the different data points here. There's cautious optimism among some of these employers, cautious optimism. But as we keep scrolling down, we get to where we were last year compared to this year. And then we see the different sectors where people, what they're concerned about from employment perspective. And then as we scroll down, you'll see that the number one thing for labor right now is that talent. 50% of these companies plan to basically shake out and get and fire people. That's the nice way to put it. Fire people because they overbought. So what happened here? Well, I'll tell you what happened here. So when they were flush with all of that government free money, printing all of these companies, they basically went on a huge hiring spree. Absolutely huge hiring spree with all of this additional cash. People had extra savings in their bank accounts, and they were buying tons of shit, right? People were just buying stuff that they didn't really need.
Sure.
And then the music stopped. It's like, dancing around the chairs. What is it, musical chairs? And then the music stopped, and there wasn't a chair for them to sit on anymore. Inflation struck, which was always going to happen. And when you print so much money and you do the opposite of what should have happened, that's what's going to happen. You're going to have to lay off thousands upon millions of people are going to lose their jobs. Here's Peter Schiff.
Back in March of 2020, I was one of the few people that accurately forecast that the pandemic was inflationary, not deflationary, because the pandemic was resulting in a reduction in supply. The proper monetary policy response would have been to reduce money supply so that prices would stay stable. But instead, the Fed did the opposite. It expanded money supply, therefore increasing demand as the markets were reducing supply. Now, a lot of the supply reduction was due to government mandates that forced businesses to close and workers to stay home. So the government ordered a reduction in supply. At the same time, the Federal Reserve delivered a huge increase in demand. In fact, people who used to be on the job making stuff were now at home collecting unemployment benefits that exceeded what they used to earn.
He's absolutely right about it. And someone just pointed out in the chat, hey, Clayton, focus on the coming food shortages. Yeah, add that into it as well, right? Add into the labor shortages, the food shortages, add into the government regulations. In fact, one of those things in the chart from the Pew Research Study was one of the top numbers in that chart that we showed you a few minutes ago was government regulation is their biggest concern. Yeah, that's a huge concern. Anyway, so Peter Schiff is right. The flow of money then stops, right? But it's not immediate. The pain is not immediate. It's months later, right? Gas prices skyrocketed, right? Then it moderates a little bit. You might feel a little bit better about yourself. But then, hey, the rent is still really high. Can't afford my rent. Grocery prices are still going up, right? Maybe meat comes down a little bit, but other things are still incredibly expensive, way higher than they've been.
Well, in fact, the most recent inflationary numbers, which came down, were based on a reduction in travel-related expenses. So, for instance, airfare and hotel was a bit cheaper, which is all right for some, but that doesn't help, working class people who can't even afford to take a vacation.
Right.
They're still paying the same for milk and gas.
Yeah, great point. So, yeah, those we feel better about inflation numbers are maybe
because your
moderating.
Vacation's a little cheaper. Like, that's not really all that comforting.
No, and as we pointed out earlier in our earlier piece, energy costs are skyrocketing. People stop buying stuff altogether right now. Things are sitting on store shelves, not selling because no one has any money anymore, right? So they're not going to the store to buy it. It's sitting there. Nobody's buying anything. And then what happens? Companies start laying people off. The company's not making profits.
I think people don't also take into consideration that like over 200,000 small businesses went out of business during the pandemic. So that's a whole other fluctuation of people entering the system that need jobs, and aren't making money. So, that's a huge impact.
Yeah.
I also think, this morning on the Wall Street Journal, there was a big article about how Apple wants to recall employees back to the office. And there's a big movement inside of Apple to not have to make this not happen. They don't want to go back. They want to continue working from home, even though there is no, as we just established in the previous segment, there's not a COVID emergency. They just don't want to right now. And it's an employee's market, right? But it may not be soon. It may be an employer's market, and we'll see employees having far less power to make demands about how they feel like working, whether or not they want to come to the office or not. And I think if you recall a story we did in the newsletter maybe 2 weeks ago about how worker productivity in the United States has plummeted to a level that's lower than we've ever seen since we started measuring this. It's interesting to note because we're getting fewer items per hour of work per American, right? Fewer products. And how does that help and how does that continue to exacerbate inflation? Well, inflation is too much money chasing after too fewer products. So if we collectively cannot manufacture products because we're used to chilling out on Zoom and working in our pajamas, right? That's not going to help either. So this sort of pushback against going to the office, look, I don't want to be anywhere either. I get it. I like being at home and working with no shoes on. But this is something that will eventually, it does feel like, is at an inflection point.
And someone in the chat, Golden Silence, says, Clayton, you make it sound like everyone went out and bought Lamborghinis and luxury things during the pandemic. I saw misery and hunger not being able to feed their families. Well, I don't think I made it sound like that at all. On this show, I've talked about famine and hunger for a year or longer. I mean, that's not, but I think certainly the luxury market exploded. The luxury market did incredibly well.
Sure. Peloton, outdoor bicycles, these big luxury stoves that are like $25,000. You couldn't get one for 6 months.
People were buying snowmobiles. They couldn't manufacture it. There was a year waiting list to buy snowmobiles. So you had all these rich people from New York City who moved out to the countryside, and they're like, "Oh, I'm saving lots of money."
It was the same with RVs.
Yeah, RVs.
RVs was
So
Yeah.
people were buying up all of these luxury goods like you wouldn't believe. And again, it's a class thing, right? So you had literally the top was doing just fine, right? Being able to work remotely, insulated and everything. And then of course you had the workers who were not doing fine. And couldn't pay bills as rent increased and that's what I'm talking about here, right? So, but the point is that there was extra money, there was extra stimulus money, there was extra money in a lot of people's bank accounts, and so they just bought a bunch of stuff, and now that's drying up. And so all these record profits that we actually saw over the past year, those are drying up. So now nobody's buying anything. Companies start laying people off in droves, and that's what we were about to see. The company's not making profits. It once was, and people wind up at the unemployment office. The data doesn't lie. So take a look at this. These are company orders. This chart, I think, is really stunning. Look at this. These are the latest numbers from Bloomberg on company orders. There's a huge plummet in the amount of orders. At the same time, companies are struggling to curb their spending. So they have a lack of orders, and a company that's high on the hog means one way to cut the fat, of course, is to lay people off, right? That's the fastest way to save money if you're a company. Then, the home you overpaid for the last year is 15% less than valuable than it was when you bought it.
At least you got that cheap mortgage.
Right. And now that you're out of a job, you can't pay the mortgage, even if it's cheaper, right? Or you're evicted as a result of like higher rent because you can't afford it and you've lost your job. There were tens of thousands of Americans who overpaid for homes during the last 2 years as home prices skyrocketed, instead of following the old rule of like using just 25% of your take-home paycheck, for a mortgage payment or rental payment. They're going to increase the amount. They increased it to 30% or 40% or even 50% of their paycheck to buy a home.
Well, because the sentiment was like, look, we may never get out of lockdowns. We might as well make where we are a safe haven.
So they thought, okay, I can work remotely because we're in this, where I'm getting some stimulus money. The government's keeping us artificially afloating, whatever, but it's not real. It was always fake money, right? And, I supported, of course, government help. If you're going to close businesses, you've got to make sure you take care of the people. We saw certain countries do well and did a good job doing this. Other countries didn't. So we're also about to see massive spikes again in oil and gas. Now, I know what you're saying. Wait a minute. Didn't we just see that these prices started coming down? Oh, get ready. Get ready, because the new data out this morning, I thought, the White House just told us that these gas prices are coming down. President Biden, his big Saudi Arabian fist bump trip was supposed to moderate these, right? We saw him take this victory lap. We're getting, Saudi oil now. We're going to have them increase production, right? That's what we saw. And then, of course, gas prices started coming down a little bit. Of course, had nothing to do with it. But again, the White House took a victory lap. Here was Jared Bernstein.
The current drop in the price of gas, down 50 cents per gallon over the past 34 days, is one of the fastest decline in retail gas prices in a decade. At current prices, the average American driver will spend about $25 per month less on gasoline than they would have if prices had stayed at their June peak.
So what happened? Was Saudi Arabia and OPEC increased oil production while Iran had actually slowed production for a short time, right? That little holiday, though, is over. Reports are today, this afternoon, before we went on this show, that OPEC is about to cut production once again.
Okay, again, too much money after too few goods. So that's what we need is less gas.
So less gas, increased profits. Because now that Iran is back producing, right? This is exactly what Saudi Arabia said. So they can take this little victory lap and pretend it had something to do with President Biden going there. It didn't. We knew all along it wasn't. OPEC was not going to increase production. They were going to do the exact opposite of that all along. Now get ready for OPEC to cut production. The experts today are predicting we could see record high oil and gas prices over the next few months. Record high. You know what we saw earlier this year? No, higher than that. Higher than anything we've seen so far, according to the data. But don't worry, they have a plan for you. If you have high energy prices and you can't afford your rent right now, here's Biden's energy secretary, Jennifer Granholm, on Sunday with their plan. Listen.
And really, you could make the same argument we were talking about tax breaks for adding solar panels, energy efficient windows, appliances, heat pumps. You know, what do you say to the families who simply can't afford this stuff in the first place?
Well, number one, for your home, yes, there are significant incentives in this bill, which is great, to reduce people's energy costs on a monthly basis. So if you are low income, you can get your home entirely weatherized through the expansion from the bipartisan infrastructure law, a significant expansion. You don't have to pay for anything. If you want heat pumps, insulation, new windows, that is covered. If you are moderate income, today you can get 30% off the price of solar panels. Those solar panels can be financed, so you don't have to have the big outlay at the front. And when they're financed in a way that reduces your energy bill, even though you have solar panels. With this 30% off, it's a significant incentive. Same thing with if you don't qualify for the weatherization program, you will be able to, starting next year, get rebates on the appliances and equipment that will help you reduce your monthly energy bill by up to 30%. This is all about reducing costs for people.
And yet the electricity prices continue.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
All you got to do is go to the solar panel website and put in coupon code US government to save 30% right now.
Yeah, that math doesn't work out.
No. Here, let's show some solar panel math. Tim Meads over at Daily Wire did the math on these solar panels. He says, so if you're somebody who lives in a 4-window home and wants to purchase a basic solar panel system and buy some efficient windows, you'll need to spend $17,320 to save $5,196. Of course, 4-window homes are hard to come by, and if they do exist, it's doubtful that their occupants can afford to spend that kind of money. I mean, so here, if you're poor, you don't have any money, what we want you to do is we want you to weatherize your home. We want you to install solar panels, and we'll give you a rebate for 30% of the cost of that. That's the answer to your soaring energy costs. Get on board, you stupid people. Why are you still using fossil fuels in your house? Why are you
still driving a gas car?
Yeah, get solar panels, get rid of the electricity, get rid of your wood burning stove, and just put solar panels and shut up and be happy about it.
Yes. I mean, it absolutely is not that easy once you start to research solar panels. And especially she's saying, well, you can get them with no cost to yourself. What she's talking about is leasing them from the solar companies, which is a very complicated thing to do. Not everybody can do it because especially if you live in, like we lived in New Jersey in the Northeast, and there's too many trees over the houses. And so we
looked into it because it was new, and we're like, I would look into it. I'm curious about this, and I want to see if we could reduce our energy costs on our house, and like, what would this mean? And we looked, and they're like, no. They came out and they're like, no, there's too many trees. Like,
yeah, it would have cost us $10,000 to remove trees.
Right.
In order to become eligible, and those trees would grow back, and we would have that problem again. Plus, leasing it also it gets complicated about how that goes on your mortgage, and if you want to sell the house, and it's really not that easy. I appreciate the intention behind a bill like this, but again,
my neighborhood associations. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say you can have solar panels, but they can't be seen from the street. So they have to be on the back of the home, where half of the neighborhood gets sun, but the other half doesn't.
Oh.
At the certain times of day.
Well, there are
1,100.
They
have to
yeah. Go ahead.
Said, solar panels have to face south, don't they? I mean, am I incorrect in that? If you're in the northern hemisphere, they have to face south because it has to face the equator, so it gets the most sun. So
I don't know exactly, but I know it has to follow. So if they're tilted this way, they've got the east to west movement of the, depending on where you.
I mean, look, we have solar panels and they're fantastic to mitigate our energy costs, but we still need to be hooked up to the grid in order to run the household that we run. And the more you really try to run the math on either getting the credits and selling them back to your power company and how many you need, or whether you lease them from the power company, it's still very complicated to do, very hard to completely mitigate all reliance on fossil fuels. And I do think it's something that politicians can sort of high-five each other over, but it will not be the final answer to our energy crisis or climate crisis. Did you know solar panels came from the Mars rover?
Yes.
It's a project that NASA developed in order to power the Mars rover.
And boy, those worked for a number of years until they got covered in dust.
Yeah.
Somebody in our chat says that they were spewing facts. I hope that's what I read correctly, because that you sold solar, and so that what we're talking about is correct here. So I hope that's right.
Cool.
That's good. That's good to know. But
I've
I should
done a
say,
lot of research on
JP Morgan Chase's Jamie Dimon. I always get that. JP Morgan's CEO, Jamie Dimon, told his rich clients yesterday that he sees something worse than what he called a hard recession. So what's worse than a hard recession? I don't know. But to bottom line this, something big is coming.
Oblivion?
Oblivion. Yeah. Maybe
We're on the
oblivion.
same page, Natalie.
Living in oblivion. That's what's coming.
I am so afraid.
I remember those Living in Oblivion's 80s CDs. Like the
Yeah, I had
compilation.
like 10 of them.
And like there's like 10 songs on it or 12 songs, and only like 4 of them were good.
Sure. Yeah.
There was always like the crap songs. You had to skip through Mickey. Or what was it? Mickey, you're so fine.
I hate that song with a passion.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, the other day we were watching Stranger Things with our older kids. And in the first season, this doesn't give anything away, but the Winona Ryder character has to keep replacing her phone. And so she went to buy the phone and she plugs it in. And my son was like, why are those strange outlets? This is in America, right? He didn't know what a phone jack looked like. He was just looking at power outlets. It's like, that's how you plug in a phone.
My nephew, years ago, we were at my grandmother's house, and she had a rotary phone. And he went to use the phone, and he just sort of like, he picks up the receiver, and they just sit there staring at it, and he's just like, I don't know.
Well, we went to a hotel like, I don't know, a couple months ago, and my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter, was in the room, and she's like, she was trying to call the other room, or she was trying to call.
So she was in a room with my mom, and we were in the room next door, and I was like, I'm going to call you, go over there. And she's like, okay. So I tried to call her, and I kept getting a busy signal. So I went next door, and I was like, what are you doing? And she was like, I'm waiting for you to call me. She was holding the receiver because she didn't know.
You have to put it back
You have
on
to
the
put
thing,
it back down.
on the carriage.
I was like, that's not how phone works.
Angel Baby Cards in our chat says, everybody hates that song. Oh, Mickey, you're so fine. Exactly. Why do you put that on an 80s
I don't. I like
compilation?
it.
You do?
Yeah.
Get out of it. No, please. No.
Would you listen to it like with the windows down?
Be like, hey, if I made a mixtape and you're
Hell
like, I
yeah,
want
I
to take
would.
my 80s songs, like that's, no. No.
All right.
That's like
I mean,
also like
I do,
99 Luftballons, also like that. It's always like, like that song.
That's an
and
annoying
like that one too.
Mickey. Oh, man. I need to send you a mixtape
Yeah.
with a note. With
You
a
don't
love
do
note.
that anymore. You send a playlist.
All right. We've got more news to get to. I want to talk about what's going on in Mexico. This is an important story, and I think it's a tipping point for American power in the Americas. We're going to get there in a second. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Goldco, because right now with the U.S. dollar, everyone kind of cramming themselves into the U.S. dollar, and I'm telling you about this recession, things are about to get crazy. So if you have an IRA, you have a 401k or a savings account, things are scary as shit out there right now. Let's be honest. The Biden administration has printed more money in the past 2 years than in the previous 100 years combined. And this afternoon, we just learned they sent their largest new package of money to Ukraine. $3 billion. It's the largest one yet. So good for them. More money printing. The national debt hit a record $30 trillion. And inflation is the highest we've seen since 1982. So if you go to our friends at Goldco by going to their website on your screen, redactedlikesgold.com, they will give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open a qualifying account. So again, redactedlikesgold.com. Go there, fill that out, and they're going to give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open a qualifying account. Thanks to Goldco for supporting our show and what we do here. We are gold bugs in this network at the Redacted Network. Also, I should mention, please subscribe. We're nearing our 1,000,000th subscriber. What number are we at right now? Do we know on our subscriber count? Is there a way to tell that live? I don't know.
Not from this
But I don't
screen.
know. Anyway, we're like at almost at a million.
972,000.
All right, we're closing in. Hopefully, maybe
in
the next
there.
few days we'll be there.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Mexico, shall we? I think it's really important for us to cover what's been happening in Mexico and what Mexico is doing to the United States. In many ways, it's standing up to the tyranny that is the United States, the imperial power that is the United States, telling all of Central and Latin America and the Americas what they're going to do with that territory. We have a big update to a story that we first brought you at the end of July. We've been covering this throughout the spring and into the summer. We'll get there in a minute with this update, but first I want to give some context to this story. Now, you recall a few months ago, we covered the story here about the Americas, right? It was the Americas Summit, or the Summit of Americas, right?
Yes, where the United States was the host.
Yeah, the United States was the host. And
so they got to set the invitation list.
Right. And Mexican President Obrador, along with the Brazilian entourage, said, hey, we're not going to come. We're going to boycott the Americas Summit unless you invite every country in the Americas. Like, why are you leaving Cuba off the list? Why are you leaving Argentina off the list? Why are you leaving Venezuela off the list? They weren't invited. I guess we didn't think that they did enough to support democracy. That was the argument from the White House, right? That those countries didn't do enough to support democracy. Of course, remember, these are also the same countries where the United States actually literally tried to overthrow the same governments of these countries, right? Think about the Bay of Pigs invasion, right? Think about what we tried to do in Cuba. Think about what we tried to do in Venezuela. But they're the ones that aren't standing up for democracy, just to be clear on that. So I guess the way that you stand up for democracy is by fomenting as many coups around the world as you can.
Right, but in the same season, the United States went to Venezuela and said, we think you're pretty corrupt, but we want to start buying some oil from you, so let's start to have a friendship.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and then also at the same time tried to foment a coup in Brazil. You know, I mean...
What's what I'm saying? You create democracy by circumventing democracy. Like,
right.
Didn't you know that?
Yes. That's the way we do it.
Right.
You don't lead by example, I guess, in this way. So I guess they weren't American enough to come to the Americas Summit because they didn't start enough coups around the world. It was a big deal, but it also showed in many ways the crumbling power of the United States. I think throughout Central and Southern America, it shows the rising power of Russia and China. We've seen partnerships forming, and you're seeing a diminishing power from the United States in these regions. And Brazil saying, you know what? No, we're not going to denounce what Vladimir Putin is doing in Ukraine. That came today. He's saying, we're not going to do that. We're not going to denounce that. I know you want us to because we're in the Americas. You want us to do that. We're not going to do that. So you're starting to see a real shift. To me, it was a really big moment, and we might actually look back at this moment as a tipping point in world power, if not just in the Americas, when they said, no, we're not going to come. We're going to boycott your Americas Summit. And old man Biden was like, okay, I didn't know anyone. I don't know who I'm talking to anyway. So I don't know who was going to be in the room anyway. So then you might recall here on the show, we covered the story about Mexico's president inviting Americans to come across the border, right, for cheaper gasoline. It was a bit of a joke, but of course, with all good jokes, there's truth in those jokes. He even made the joke once again when he visited the White House a short time later with President Biden when they had the state visit. And Biden was not pleased about the joke, apparently. Again, come across the border into Mexico because gas is cheaper here in Mexico. Just drive across to Tijuana and get your cheaper gas and your medications, by the way.
Yes.
And then just go back to America. Well, also the note we've been covering on the show, how many Americans are actually just moving to Mexico. They're not even just driving across and coming back. They're just moving there. Thousands moving to Mexico. So again, we charge less in Mexico for our citizens to get gasoline. So come here. And then we covered this story at the end of July after the New York Times reported this bombshell story. We thought it was amazing, so we covered it then. And here was the headline. The Biden administration will challenge Mexico's state control of its energy industry. What was it starting to do? It wasn't surprising that the United States once again was stepping up to be the bully in this situation. Here's how the Washington Post framed this story in their opinion pages. Mexico's energy policy gives the U.S. no choice but to push back. Oh, yeah. They have no choice but to push back. And if you actually read into the article, the United States and Mexico have plenty of tough issues to deal with, from the lingering coronavirus pandemic to inflation to the continuing surge of migrants through their mutual border. It would be best for both countries if they could address these issues in an atmosphere of calm and mutual cooperation, with no gratuitous irritations to this vital bilateral relationship.
Okay. I mean, they're brother and sister. They should just hug each other, right? And
Right.
Get along.
Just get along. Don't stand up for
Yeah,
yourself, Mexico. Let the U.S.
Forget about the
bully
wall.
Well, the issue here is that Mexican oil and gas is state-run, and the United States wants Mexico to open up for private industry, American companies to do business there, right? So they are basically acting as lobbyists,
right,
on behalf of the oil and gas industry, which has record profits, has had for the first 2 quarters of 2022. Every oil and gas company that's American.
But they need more profits.
Is doing just fine, but the United States is now lobbying on their behalf to be able to make money inside of Mexico.
Right, because of NAFTA and these agreements, right? You know, we need to, these prices need to be on parity. That's what we're saying, that the prices in the United States are high. And what the United States is essentially asking Mexico to do is to open up their markets so that those prices will also be high. They want Mexicans to pay more for gas so that they equal what the United States citizens are paying for gas.
Yes. You can't have cheap gas down there.
Sounds like a win-win for Mexico. Like, how do you take that phone call from the White House? Here's Catherine Tai from the United States. She says, "We have repeatedly expressed serious concerns about a series of changes in Mexico's energy policies and their consistency with Mexico's commitments under the USMCA. Now, we've tried to work constructively with the Mexican government to address these concerns, but unfortunately, U.S. companies continue to face unfair treatment in Mexico."
Oh, those poor U.S. companies.
The oil and gas companies, they really need the United States to go to bat for them.
So Mexico controls their oil and gas, and they subsidize it through Pemex, which is their state-owned. And then Mexico basically subsidizes the oil and gas industry to reduce the average cost to Mexicans, so they're not paying as much. This is the idea, right? And the same thing, the same way we do that in the United States with certain things, right?
So we're saying to them, stop this state-run gas that is good for your people.
Right.
Let our companies in there so they can make money. And who cares what happens to your people if they're getting cheap gas or not?
Jay Thomas in our chat says, a coup incoming? Yeah. Yeah, anytime.
Isn't this the exact same scenario from Venezuela?
Yeah. Anytime you see this kind of stuff, it's like, wow, that's interesting that Obrador is suddenly thrown out of office. How did that mysteriously happen? So the U.S., but it makes Uncle Sam unhappy, this whole process. And it makes all those oil and gas lobbyists in Washington, D.C. super pissed off that Mexico is doing this because they want more money. So the U.S. oil and gas companies spend millions to lobby Congress to do their bidding. And then these companies don't like cheaper gas in Mexico. So, of course, now they want Team Biden to slap tariffs on Mexico. And Obrador is going to raise gas prices to keep them in parity with what Americans pay at the pump. That's the idea. So I think I summed it up.
Well, you know what that's going to do? That's going to set a precedent, and then the pharmaceutical industry is going to be like, wait a minute, we can do that?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They're paying less for our drugs in Mexico
Right.
than they are here? Yep. No more.
So I kind of teased at the beginning. I kind of buried the lead a little bit, but I wanted some context in this story. So we have a big update this afternoon on this story. And it's taken a deeper turn now that Mexico appears to be backing down to the United States. Not fully, but maybe you can read between the tea leaves here and tell me. They're backing down to both the United States and big oil and natural gas companies. So here's a statement from the Natural Gas Intelligence. This is from Mexico, their statement this afternoon. Mexico's energy ministry said it was postponing by 90 days this previously announced rule change in the national pipeline system. The new rules would require users to source their gas from Mexican state companies, CFE or Pemex, concurrently. This decision is being fought in the courts by at least 10 natural gas firms in Mexico. So those 10 natural gas firms, the private, want access to this market. And now Mexico is saying, okay, these changes that we were going to further nationalize it, further make it state run, further subsidizing it, further helping Mexicans, we're going to put this plan on hold because we're feeling the heat from the United States. We're feeling the heat
And all
from
you got
these
to ask
private
yourself,
companies.
what kind of deal did they offer them?
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, how do you...
Because there had to be some kind of deal.
Throw your people under the bus by the pressure of the United States.
So I like that the original complaint, the original complaint is that individual companies, the government of Mexico is preventing the private companies in the U.S. from doing the business the way they want to do it. And then when the private companies in Mexico are like, we don't want anything to do with this, the American response is, but your government is going to make you.
Yeah.
Like, it's like a complete flip of the script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just...
And further, remember who pushed Mexico to nationalize their energy industry? Hillary Clinton. Remember, Hillary Clinton was the one that pushed them to move in this direction. So now the Biden administration is trying to completely unwind that and make them suffer. So here's the big update, is that Mexico is saying we're going to postpone this thing by 90 days, which you know what a postponement means. They're going to review it, and then they'll throw it out. And then Mexicans, I guess, can prepare to start paying more for gasoline because they're going to be walked on by the United States and the oil companies.
Like us.
Just like us. So yeah, hey, you can move back. You can move back to the United States now.
Because gas will be the same.
You cross the border, it'll be no difference. Yeah. So that's the very latest on that. We hope that you subscribe to the channel. We hope that you're a part of our community. Tony Joslin says, I want to be the 1,000,000th subscriber.
Yes. Well, thank you for becoming a supporter, and thanks for being here today.
He's been a member for 25 months. Thank you, Tony. Thank you so much. You can become a member just by going to youtube.com/redacted news. That's how you become a channel subscriber, or just click the subscribe button right here on YouTube or on Rumble, wherever fine videos are played.
All right, shall we get to our super chats? We promised we would.
Yes, let's do some super chats.
And then we'll get you out of here.
All right. Executive Studios with a super sticker. Thank you. Wicked Insanity. End of it all. Oppenheimer Ranch Project. Boom. Yvonne Simonis with 3 different super chats. Keep going, Clayton. Don't let YouTube frustrate you. This is purposely being done. Let's be clear. It is the Democrats that does not want us to hear your stories, Clayton. Look at all the Democrat man-made variants. I will say to that there's really not a difference between Democrats and Republicans at this point.
No. I mean, the fact that they're begging Mitch McConnell to step up and do something right now. I mean, I've seen like Republicans are begging. I mean, really? Like, they're all one part of one big party.
Zach Boyles, what party rebranded the flu? There are no heroes. Events, again, to be honest, I'm low-key upset that Natalie and Clayton were conned into getting the initial vaccine. It's okay, you're forgiven. I think that's...
Yeah.
This is from Dr. Ron Paul, but I verified this is not actually Ron Paul. Fed Res QT is about to not just throw us into a recession, or worse, it's causing global liquidity squeeze. King dollar will continue to crush all currencies, bringing us ever closer to confronting China via Thucydides trap. I don't know what that is.
Don't know.
Did any of that make sense?
Sort of.
Somewhat.
The main themes I'm with you on.
GDNPB. If you can find it, watch Dr. Tal Zach's CSO Moderna 2017 TED Talk. It will tell you their plan to change the medical system into a gene therapy system, and you'll see the reality of what they're doing. Dr. Tal Zach, CSO.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Thank you.
Events, I need to move to Portugal, but the country does not have Chick-fil-A. This means in the U.S. is too much. Decisions.
You're right.
Yeah, you're right about that, but you will get some other delicious chicken, that's for sure.
Johan Puit with a super sticker. Thank you. Events, again, CDC data is skewed. I don't believe a lick of it. All tainted data. Healthcare in the U.S. is adulterated.
Belinda and Angel Baby Cards want to know how Grover and Pizza are doing. So Grover is my dog. Pizza is David's dog. Grover is downstairs asleep. He doesn't really join us in the studio much anymore. He sleeps in our bed.
He doesn't.
He's over it. He's over us. Yeah. I'm sorry to lose his subscription. But also there's a new dog in the house named Chico. And Chico is also doing just dandy.
And Pizza's doing amazing. She's out on a walk right now, but she's doing great. Daniel Edmonds, cop to civilian ratio, rich to poor ratio says everything you get when you are willing to accept and deserve no sympathy. Events. Newsom will force California nurses to take this new vaccine. My awesome prediction. I knew this whole vaccine issue was a mess in March 2020 with the implementation of the mRNA technology for the sake of time. Fishy.
Brandon C. asked me, how is Gonzalo Lira doing? Good. I spoke to him this weekend. He said he's smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, which is not good.
That's not good.
Because of the constant shelling. He's been under stress there. But otherwise, he's good, he said.
GDNPB, we've been living this phenomenal digital revolution. I'm here today to tell you that we are actually hacking the software of life. And then you read that one. Beer and flies. I can't get rid of the thought that EU leaders exterminate people on purpose following the green agenda of overpopulation. See, I'm trying to find some that I can read.
Okay.
Some of these
we got to be
some
careful.
Of these are out there today. Bitcoin Russ, have you ever filed?
Well, actually, to be fair, that's actually right from the World Economic Forum's mouth. You can watch the TED Talk. I know it's crazy, but that's literally what they said. So I know it sounds crazy from a viewer leaving a super chat, but literally the WEF said that. Said it.
Yeah.
That, anyway.
This is a really wholesome one right here from Bitcoin Russ. Have you ever filled a turkey full of helium and let it float around the room? I haven't.
I'm not.
No, but is that possible? I don't think you can fill a turkey. It's too heavy. It'd be way too heavy, right?
Yeah.
No. I want to try it, though.
You're not going to do anything of the sort.
I'm going to try it now.
Glenn Evans,
You can
God
fill it with
bless
air
this
and toss
station
it in
for
your
telling it
pool.
like it is. Yeah. And then Brandon McGee, thank you guys so much for all your hard work out there to oblivion and beyond.
Thank you. And I did hear the previous one, the tell it like it is. Thank you so much. We talked over you and I apologize.
Thank you.
That was my fault.
Nah.
And that's it.
Thank you guys. Well, thank you everyone for subscribing, smashing that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter. Go to redacted.inc. That is the place to go, redacted.inc, and we will have a newsletter out to you first thing in the morning, and we will be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you hit that little bell notification so you'll be notified when we go live. Thanks everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.